Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, let's dive right into this. Today we're unpacking a seriously dense, totally fascinating, and incredibly powerful excerpt of ancient wisdom. We're looking at the Gospel of Matthew, specifically chapter 7, verses 6 and 13 through 14. In just about 100 translated words, this text delivers some of the absolute most enduring metaphors in human history. We're going to break down these intense metaphorical dichotomies, pull them apart piece by piece, and see exactly how they all click together to build a complete, cohesive worldview. You've more than likely heard this phrase before: whatever you wish that men would do to you, do so to them. Right? It's an unbelievably famous piece of ethical instruction. But honestly, we kind of misunderstand it today. We slap it on motivational posters, cross-stitch it onto pillows, and basically treat it like this simple, standalone proverb. But what we're actually going to do today is deconstruct exactly how this famous quote fits into a much larger and, honestly, sometimes startling sequence of metaphors. It isn't just an isolated saying. It's actually this really intense directive sandwiched right between some pretty stark warnings and ultimate destinations. So here's our roadmap for today's explainer. First up, the three great teachings. Second, guarding the holy. Third, the golden rule. Fourth, two gates, two paths. And finally, finding the narrow way. We've got a lot of ground to cover, so let's just jump right in.
Starting off with Section 1, the three great teachings, a structural overview.
And that leads us right into Section 2, guarding the holy, the sacred, and the swine. To really get this text, we first need to look at how it's built. These words are spoken by Jesus to his disciples. And what's so wild here is how abruptly the text shifts gears. Within just a few short verses, we get three completely distinct, seemingly unconnected metaphorical teachings packed super tightly together. It kicks off with a profound and, frankly, a pretty stark warning about protecting things of immense value. Now, what's really interesting here is the immense visual contrast it draws right out of the gate. On one hand, we've got what is holy and pearls. These represent ultimate value, luxury, beauty, purity, the whole shebang. On the other hand, the text throws in dogs and swine. And remember, in the historical context of this ancient text, these were not cute domestic pets. They were considered unclean, undiscriminating scavengers. So the text is setting up this extreme, totally unbridgeable dichotomy between the sacred and the profane. And the text doesn't just present these opposites and leave them there. It actually tells a little mini narrative of what happens if you carelessly mix them. It says if you throw your pearls before swine, there's a very specific cause and effect progression of violence. Step 1, they will trample them underfoot. The pigs literally have no concept of a pearl's value. To them, it's not food, so it just gets uselessly crushed in the mud. But then comes step 2, which totally raises the stakes. They will turn to attack you. I really want you to linger on the active verbs here for a second. Trample, turn, attack. So why does this matter to us? Well, because the source text isn't just telling a quaint little story about wasted jewelry. It's an explicit warning of active harm. Not just loss, harm. You aren't merely losing your pearls. You're putting yourself in literal physical danger by offering something profoundly valuable to those who are entirely incapable of receiving it. It's this striking, highly visual lesson in why strict discernment is absolutely crucial. If you think about it in a modern context, it's a timeless lesson in boundaries, right? It's about knowing who is actually ready to receive your most valuable time, your energy, or your deep vulnerability, and actively protecting those things from chaotic environments. All right, Section 3, the golden rule, action and reciprocity. Here is where the text makes a really sharp pivot. We move entirely away from that harsh metaphor of wild animals trampling pearls, and we drop directly into the realm of human interaction. The text says, whatever you wish that men would do to you, do so to them. Notice the required perfect symmetry of this instruction. It's brilliant. It links your internal desire directly with your external action. It basically takes your own internal self-interest, what you deeply wish for yourself in your quietest, most vulnerable moments, and demands that you project that outward as the exact non-negotiable standard for how you treat everybody else. You essentially become the baseline for your own empathy. And the source text actually goes a massive step further to really cement the gravity of this rule. It boldly distills the absolute entirety of the law and the prophets down into the single actionable rule of reciprocity. Now, to the original audience, the law and the prophets meant all of the complex historical, religious laws and ethical teachings of their entire culture. Have you ever tried reading through ancient legal codes? They are exhaustingly detailed, highly specific, and frankly, completely overwhelming to keep track of. So think about the magnitude of what's happening here. Volumes upon volumes of complex, granular law are summed up in one radical swoop simply by doing unto others as you wish them to do unto you. It's a real game changer. Now for Section 4, Two Gates, Two Paths, the Ultimate Dichotomy. All right, so after dealing with protecting the sacred and treating our neighbors ethically, the text abruptly shifts one last time to focus on our ultimate direction. It gives us a destination metaphor that is incredibly visually striking and totally uncompromising. We are presented with absolute opposites. On one side, we have the wide gate. Its characteristics: the way is easy, it leads to destruction, and it's found by many. On the other side, the narrow gate. The way is hard, it leads to life, and it's found by few. And this brilliantly illustrates the complete lack of gray area here. There is absolutely no middle ground presented. It is a strict binary choice between two entirely different trajectories. Let's isolate that first path for a second. The wide gate, the easy way that leads to destruction. We really have to ask ourselves, why does the source text explicitly link the easy way directly to destruction? I mean, usually we think of an easy life as a good thing, right? But here, ease implies a really dangerous lack of discipline. It implies just going with the flow of the crowd, taking the path of least resistance. In modern terms, think about the psychology of the easy path. The comfort of conformity, the allure of instant gratification, just sort of drifting along without any intentional thought. The text argues that this lack of friction inevitably, always, unravels into ruin. It's warning us to be deeply, deeply suspicious of the easy path. Now, in direct contrast to that, we have the second path, the narrow gate, the hard way that leads to life. Just as that previous teaching totally inverted our normal expectations of the word easy, this text boldly pairs the word hard with life. It establishes that the core difficulty of this entire teaching, having the discernment to protect the holy, having the discipline to perfectly practice the golden rule, is genuinely actually difficult. The path of true life requires friction. It requires effort and a deliberate squeezing through a narrow, difficult space. Which brings us to our final section, Section 5, Finding the Narrow Way, the Many versus the Few. The text doesn't just describe the architectural differences between these two gates, it actually assigns a very specific and honestly somewhat sobering demographic split to them. The vast numerical difference stated here is striking. A massive majority represents the many, who just naturally drift toward the wide gate, and an incredibly small minority represents the few who take the narrow gate. The source material is definitive on this. The default human setting, the massive crowd, effortlessly glides toward the easy destructive path. Only a very, very small fraction of people end up on the hard, life-giving path. To put that into perspective, it's like a giant funnel versus a tiny needle. So the crucial point is embedded right here in the exact, specific verbs the text uses to describe these two groups. For the wide gate, the text says, those who enter by it. The word enter implies just passively wandering in. I mean, the gate is so wide and the crowd is so huge that you can just passively drift right through it without paying any attention at all. But for the narrow gate, the text says, those who find it. The word find implies an active, deliberate, and really difficult search. You do not accidentally stumble into the narrow gate. You have to be actively looking for it. All right, let's step back for a second and tie these seemingly disparate teachings into one cohesive worldview. First, guard what is holy from destruction, meaning practice sharp discernment. Second, do to others what you wish for yourself, meaning practice perfect, active empathy. And third, seek the hard, narrow path to life, because true value requires an active search and completely embraces difficulty. Together, these aren't just random sayings. They form a unified, brilliant map of protection, action, and direction. And that leaves us with a really profound challenge, inspired directly by the source text. The way is hard, and those who find it are few. By understanding the warnings of the swine, by embracing the really heavy responsibility of the golden rule, and by recognizing the reality of the difficult path, we are forced to evaluate our own trajectory. So, I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought to carry with you today. Which gate will you enter?